Hi, today I'm with a very special guest, Dr. Tyler Rauert, and Dr. Tyler is actually the director of SSN as well as professor at NISA Center in Washington DC. So welcome to our program.
Thank you, sir.
So I'm actually meeting him during his visit to Sri Lanka to do the working group for NISA. So welcome to our program.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so I just want to ask you at the beginning, what are the scope and the objectives of NISA and SSN?
It's a good question. Take it in two parts. First, the NISA Center. It's affiliated with the U.S. National Defense University. And NISA, the letters N-E-S-A, stand for the Near East and South Asia. We're what's called a regional center, set up largely to engage officials from the North Africa, the Middle East, and South Asia on strategic issues of international relations, security studies, those sorts of things. What we do is bring these officials, for the most part, to the United States for about 2-week-long programs where we'll focus on either sort of broad national security concerns of the countries in the region, or thematic issues. For instance, in January, I directed a seminar that we conducted on governance, justice, and the rule of law in transnational threats. So these officials from these various countries come together for 2, maybe 3 weeks, depending on the program, share their ideas, share their experiences, their concerns. They learn a little bit about the United States while they're there, which is also useful. And they get to know each other, because really what we are professional relationship makers. We think it's important that these officials have solid working relationships with one another so that they can establish trust with each other, because they're going to have to be working together in the future. In an increasingly interconnected world, they need to work together, and we want to help them make those connections that make that happen. Similarly, the Strategic Studies Network was started as an initiative of the NISA Center in partnership with several other similar centers throughout the Middle East and South Asia. The idea there was to bring together think tanks, war colleges, and strategic studies institutes together to share the work that they're doing, to share contacts with one another, and to engage in collaborative research. In many ways, it's an effort to sort of consolidate and make more efficient the work of various think tanks in the region. So that's the general scope of both the Near East South Asia Center, but also the Strategic Studies Network, which we partner, the co-sponsors in the network are institutions like the Jordanian National Defense College, the National Defense University of Pakistan, Institute for Defense Studies and Analyses in India, the Turkish Center for Strategic Research, organizations like that, as well as a plethora of other organizations such as the Regional Center for Strategic Studies.
Yeah, so now I know that RCSS is working some years with SSN. So how do kind of evaluate or review the partnership?
Our partnership with RCSS has been fantastic, not just in this event, because RCSS hosting us here in Sri Lanka has been fabulous, but also in the contributions that RCSS has made to the work of the network over the past 4 or 5 years. RCSS has participated in several of these working groups. Right now, the ones on regional economic integration and issues of governance. And so they continually contribute to the intellectual capital there, but also in connecting the Strategic Studies Network to other institutions throughout South Asia. Sort of, we find that the Strategic Studies Network and RCSS combine to make a kind of network of networks, if you will, or a meta think tank that helps connect multiple groups doing similar things, interested in similar topics, but who might otherwise not get the chance to talk. So it's a very unique and I think beneficial relationship.
Right. Now, you are here after some time, I guess, now, but you have been to Sri Lanka before as an organization, as an individual. So now we are talking about a post-war Sri Lanka after finishing the war in 2009. So what are your impressions about the country, or about the city in general?
Yeah, well, I personally have not been to Sri Lanka since October of 2007. So the country that I find myself in today is a very different place than it was just those 4.5 years ago. It's difficult for me to say, how I would rate the changes, having only been here twice. But I do recognize the feel of Colombo is different now than it was a few years ago, and there has been a great deal of development in the city. So I'm glad to be back in Sri Lanka after a bit of an absence. The Strategic Studies Network, however, was here in 2009 as well. So maybe some others would have some other views about that.
Okay, so and I want to actually discuss about strategic issues. Now we hear a lot of media coverage about American intervention or engagement in South Asia. So any comments on Americans' interest or strategic interest in South Asia in general, according to your understanding?
Yeah, I think the U.S. has a very significant strategic interest in South Asia, not least of which is because something on the order of over 1/5 of the world's population is in South Asia. So just in terms of the global population, it's an important region. But as you know, we're also actively engaged in Afghanistan. So that then has implications throughout the subcontinent. Not only that, but a major American strategic interest is in maintaining freedom of the seas, world trade flows, not just in energy out of the Persian Gulf, but in all kinds of goods and services. So simply the geographic position of South Asia and in general, and then Sri Lanka in particular, makes it an important geostrategic region in which the United States, I think, is going to be engaged for quite some time.
And also now you have done some work on maritime security and Indian Ocean piracy. So I'd like to also get your comment as my final questions about Indian Ocean piracy and maritime security in the region in general.
Okay, yeah, on Indian Ocean piracy first, my take on that is that it's primarily an issue in which we need to look at it both in terms of prioritization of security issues, then also sequencing of those priorities. Now, what do I mean by that? Indian Ocean piracy, as you know all too well, emanates primarily from Somalia. And Somalia has a host of problems that affect other countries in the region. And so the issue of piracy, I think, needs to be viewed within that context of Somalia, sort of in the bigger picture. Well, what are some of the other issues that emanate from Somalia that might compete with piracy as a security concern? Simple stability of the government is one. Food security for the people who live in Somalia is another. And then also high on the list, at least for Americans, is terrorism and counterterrorism. And then especially as that relates to Somalia's neighbors and the impact of that instability on their neighbors. So for many, I think, as you prioritize those concerns, when you look at maritime piracy, yes, it's an important issue, but it has not reached the level that it has such an impact on international trade that it makes it painful for the countries involved. It is a problem, yes, not to be ignored, but it doesn't reach the scope of, say, a terrorist attack that might emanate from Somalia that has a direct effect on potentially hundreds, if not thousands, of people in their lives. So as you rate the security concerns and the threat to individuals that might emanate from Somalia, I think you would say counterterrorism is a very significant one. And food security and feeding the people of Somalia, especially after the famine in the Horn of Africa last year, is another very important security concern. And therefore, piracy and combating piracy would come third in that priority list. Again, not to say that it isn't important, it's merely to say that there are other issues that are also important. So then as you view Indian Ocean piracy, I think it's wise to think of how you sequence addressing those issues, because I don't think we can do everything all at once. So while the international community can do its best to keep a lid on piracy and not let it get any worse, the potential for destabilizing the rest of Somalia by actively engaging in counter-piracy on land might be too much to handle. So you deal with stability and food and counterterrorism issues first, and then once those are taken care of, then you move to a more robust action against Indian Ocean piracy, which then takes us to maritime security more broadly. I think Indian Ocean piracy is a very good issue that helps us in the international community focus on maritime security more broadly. It allows us to interact with each other. It allows us to go through real-time, real-life, live exercises of cooperative naval engagement as well as diplomatic engagement on that issue. So it helps, I think, to lay the foundation for an institutionalization of a security architecture in the Indian Ocean basin, which of course links some very vital areas of trade and commerce. I mean, the Asia-Pacific region on the one side and the Persian Gulf and Mediterranean seas on the other. So the Indian Ocean, I think, is only going to grow in importance, and so the shared security concerns that various countries have in the Indian Ocean, piracy being one of them, piracy helps us to be able to, in a sense, we can make something good out of a bad situation, where in working together to confront piracy, we lay the foundation for better maritime security in the future.
Thank you very much for your valuable time. I hope you have very good time in Sri Lanka and also very successful in outcomes in your working group.
Excellent. Thank you, sir.